almost didn't see you guys there. This is Chris from Dev Coffee, and we're about to build a Reddit API clone. Let's do it. Before we get started, I want to cover a few prerequisites. Like I was saying earlier, this is going to be a faster paced series. So I'm going to go ahead and assume you guys have basic knowledge of Express, Node, and Mongo. If you guys are kind of worrying, don't worry. I'm going to link some awesome tutorials in the description below to get you up and running if you don't have that basic understanding of Express, Node, and Mongo. So that's kind of the first one, is just to have an understanding of it. The next thing is to have a local copy or a remote copy of MongoDB running. So let me go ahead and just do that right here. If you guys don't know how to do that, I'm also going to link a tutorial that Mongo actually has, an outstanding tutorial for Windows and Mac on how to get that working. So I'm just going to run my copy right here. And this will default to port 27017. I don't know why I said it like that. But now I have that running. So once you guys have that running, we'll be good. And now kind of for the final thing is we're just going to clone this repo right here. Now I'll put this in the description below. And you guys just clone it. Then, or git clone, and then cd, okay, git clone. There we go. And I'll cd into it. And now we can open this up in your text editor of choice, and we're ready to go. The first thing I want to do is do npm install. I have some basic packages here that I kind of, or not npm start, npm install. I have some basic packages here that I kind of got us started with. In a previous tutorial, I covered how to set up Babel and environment variables, and also NodeMon. These are different things that I use all the time for development. We're going to be using ES 2015 and 17, and NodeMon will basically, anytime you make a change to a file, it will rerun the server. This is extremely handy when you're doing development and you're having to control C and turn off your server every single time and restart it. It'll kind of save a lot of time for us. All right, we'll see over here we have a basic structure with just a server directory, and in here we have an index.js file that just console.logs index.js. Pretty boring, right? Well, let's go ahead and get Express in here. So let's npm install express -- save. Okay? And while this is running, what we can do is, while this is running, let's go ahead and import it. So we're going to import Express from Express. And then we're going to make a new variable called app. And again, this is a very, very basic way of doing Express. There we go. So now we have our instance of Express. And what we can do is just app.listen to whatever port. Let's go ahead and do port 3000. And then it has a callback method. We just do console.log running on port 3000. A lot of fun. There we go. So now if we do npm start, we should see this is running, and we will not have to restart this. And let me show you kind of how NodeMon works, just in case you guys are not familiar. If I were to change this to something and hit save, we'll see it restarts and it reruns that index.js file. It's really, really nice. Okay. From here, what we want to do is, I like splitting this out into 3 files. And let me show you what I mean. Inside this server folder, we're going to make 2 new files, app.js and routes.js. This is good separation of concerns right here for your middleware and your Express, and as well as your routes. And over here at our index.js, we're going to cut this right here and just have it be blank for right now. And inside of our app.js, we're going to paste this in here. Since this is our app right here, we're going to export our app. Okay. And now what we do is we're going to take this listener off of here as well. So all this is going to be is just our instance of app for right now. And then over here, we're going to import app from app.js. And then we're going to put the listener right there. So all this index.js file is doing is just running our instance of Express. Now it's really good to separate this out, and now we have access to this app anywhere we want to. We don't have it in just one file. Okay. Now over here we have routes. Let's set up our first route doing it this way. If you guys went through the basic Express tutorial, have some experience with Express, we know that we could just do this if we wanted to. and just do a very, very basic endpoint. I can just do JSON message working. And if I go over to my browser and then do localhost 3000, I can see that it's working. Let me go ahead and zoom in real quick. And that's a good way to do it, but you'll see here that this app is going to get really, really cluttered if we put all of our logic, all of our routes, and everything in there. It's just not a good way of doing things. What we'll want to do is we're going to want to utilize this route folder, or file rather. So we're going to import Express over here. And then we're going to make a constant called router, or routes rather, and set this equal to Express. Okay? Now what we can do is we can actually just go and cut that route we just made, paste it right there, and we can export this router. Or router, I meant to put routes, not routers. And then this will not be app anymore, this will be routes. And put a semicolon right there. And let's import that in this file. So we'll import our routes from routes, or /routes rather. And now, in order to get this, all of our routes in here, all we have to do is app.get, or app.use rather. And now we can give it a prefix. So let's go ahead and make the prefix API. So everything will be /API from this point. Since this is only going to be an API, we're not going to have it have any front-end logic or anything like that. And then we just paste in this routes. And now we'll see here that it cannot get that because we got to do /API, and it's working the exact same. Okay, cool. Now that we kind of have this working, we have a good workflow. Now all of this is going to have our middleware. We're going to put our middleware right here. This will have all of our routes, and we'll segregate this out to have a very distinct way, like all of our routes for comments or users or upvotes will all be in a very distinct location. Okay, but we're probably looking right here, and this is going to get really, really overwhelming. We'll see that we have this method, or function rather. If we had 30 different functions that are doing logic and routes, it's going to get cluttered extremely fast. Let's go ahead and make a new folder called controllers. And controllers is where all of our business logic is going to live. Oh, let's make a new controller called just basic controller. This will just have our initial route right here. So all we have to do is actually just make a new constant, a basic controller, set it equal to an empty object. Then we'll do basic controller dot get. And the way that this is going to be set up is anytime we want a different method, all we'll do is, so like let's say we basic controller dot get avatar, okay? And we have some logic in here that will get the avatar. Or if we had like basic controller dot get weather or post weather or something like that, this will all live in here. So all we're going to do is let's just call this get. We can cut this out right there, paste it, and we'll do something like, let's do a message like welcome to our API. Okay, and make sure to export default this controller. And now all we have to do is just import it here. So all of our imports will be right here. So this will be our controller imports. And we'll just import basic controller from, and all I have to do is controllers, basic controllers, or controller. And what I can do now is basic controller dot get, and it will be working the exact same. As we can see right there, welcome to our API. But again, it's a lot more scalable. We're not just having one file doing all the work. We're just kind of splitting the load and have very good separation of concerns here. All right, what we probably want to do now is connect to our MongoDB instance. We kind of have all of this route set up. We have our middleware set up if we need it. Now, we don't have any middleware yet, but we will have to be using some very soon. The best place to be connecting to our database would probably be in this app.js folder. And in order to connect to our database, we're going to be using Mongoose. Don't worry if you guys don't know what Mongoose is. It's just a really, really nice way to get models and validation and different business logic with MongoDB. You guys can look at the documentation again, but it should be very straightforward. So we're going to npm install Mongoose and let that install. And up here, we're going to import Mongoose from Mongoose. And let's connect to our database right here. So we do Mongoose, I believe, connect. We pass in the database string, which in this case, I got it copied on the other screen. It will be this. Now remember guys, this slash, whatever this might be, it does have importance. So I would put this. This would not, I would be targeting the root. I need to target a database right there, which is dev coffee. And then I can have a callback function right here. So I can say console.log connected to MongoDB. Is that how you spell connected? Yeah, I think so. npm start. And we'll see that it says connected to MongoDB. And let me put ... All right, so now we have this connection to MongoDB. What we can do now is start defining our different models. We're going to want a post model, a user model, a comment model, and a vote model. I'll kind of walk you guys through how this is going to be set up. Let's make a new folder and call it models. If you guys are familiar with what models are, in Mongo, we don't, like if we were to be doing some type of SQL database, we would have to define each model, each relationship. In Mongo, it's a NoSQL database, so those relationships, those models aren't there by default. You can manually define them, and that's what we're using Mongoose for. We go over here, and we're going to make a new file, and let's call it index.js, and I'll show you why here in a second. We'll just leave that blank, and then we're going to make one called user.js. Now, in user.js, this is where we're going to set up our different models. We're going to import Mongoose. Then we're going to have to pull out the schema, because what a schema is pretty much, it's our way of defining the model. It's the title, what data type it is. It defines the entire schema, the entire different data tables, the types, the requirements, everything that goes into making that individual table. Now it's called a collection. I keep calling it a table, but it's called a collection inside of MongoDB. And we're going to get that from Mongoose. Then we're going to make a constant called the user schema. And this is where we're going to make a new instance of the schema. Okay. In here, we're going to pass in all the different properties that we want for our collection. Now for a user, we probably want a username. That would probably be beneficial, right? And we could just pass in the type that we want it to be, which would just be a string. But if we wanted different options, we can open up an object and do it this way. So let's go ahead and do a type of string. Okay. And now we can put required. This is probably going to be required. Then we can do min length. Now what min length is we can kind of decide on, we want a length of 5 characters. And then the second thing inside of this array would be the message that sends if it's not 5 characters. So we're going to want to say like username must be 5 characters or more. Okay, cool. And now we'll do password, and password will pretty much be the same, but I guess we'll just right here it'll be required. We'll make it 8 characters, make it a little bit harder for them, and then change the validation to say password. Right now we're not going to be covering the authentication in this video, but in I think either next video or 2 videos from now, we will cover authentication. It's going to be doing a lot more, such as encrypting our password, making sure there's different restraints or restrictions on the password field. So right now we're just going to leave it very simple like this, but know that it's not going to stay like this. Okay, so now we want to actually attach our schema to our model. To do that, we let me just go ahead and say write some encryption here. There will be different logic there, and it will utilize something called hooks. Now this is really cool. It's a cool concept that before you save the data, you can run methods, or after you save the data, or after you delete the data or update it. Really, really cool stuff. All right, so over here, what we're going to do is make a new constant called user and set it equal to mongoose, okay, dot model, and then the first parameter is going to be the name of the model, which would be user, and then the second parameter will be the schema, and you'll see we just defined our schema right there, so we can do that, and now we'll export default the user. All right, so you might be wondering, why are we exporting this? Well, you remember that index.js file that we made? If we go ahead and import user from user, now we can export default our user. And again, notice that I make this an object because we're going to have probably 4 or 5 different models here. Now we have one entry point that we can use our models and share them every single place. So instead of me having to import 3 or 4 different models, I can just import this this index file right here and have access to all of our models. All right, so let's create a user. That's probably a good idea. Let's go over to our controllers and make a new controller called user controller. All right, and we'll import that database. Oh, we're in the current directory. We go up one directory, we go to models, then we go to index, or we actually don't have to go into index, we just do that, and that will pull that index file by default. So this will happen by default. Okay, whoops. And then right over here, we're going to make a constant called user controller. This will be the same setup every single time, which will be an empty object. And make sure you export default this. Then right here, what we can do is user controller dot post. Now, using kind of the REST way of doing it things, so technically we could call this create, we could call this post, but usually when it is a create, I like to call it post because we're going to be doing the post action to this route, which would create our user. So let's go ahead and just call this post. Again, we can name this method anything we want. And we're going to pass in, it's going to have the request and response. Let's go ahead and get the username and the password. So what are we saying here? We're expecting our user, or sorry, whoever's using the API to pass in 2 parameters, which will be the username and password. And where are we going to get that from is the request body. Okay? Then over here, what we want to do is we want to create a new user. Now, we will have some validation here, and this is going to be covered in a different video, so I'm just going to put a comment there. We will do validation and make sure that they pass the user and the password, and if the password is long enough. We also have the other validation with our database, which is cool. Okay? So now what we can do is make a constant called user and set it equal to a new instance of user. Let me explain how this is going to work, and we'll pass in the username and the password. Okay. So now that we have this user, what's known as a cursor, we have this user cursor, we can create a new instance of this model that we can then do this, save. Now this save will actually go and save it to our collection, and we'll have access to it in the database now because it is saved. And there's 2 different, so this is a promise, so it will have a then and then a catch. In here, it will have a method which will have the new user. I'll show you exactly what this looks like. And then the catch is if something went wrong. We're going to want to catch this a certain way. All right, so now using our response parameter, we can do, let's do a response status of 200. And we'll pass a JSON object back. And what I like doing is putting 2 properties. So one property will be a success, and you'll put true there because we know for a fact if this happened, if it got to this point, it did successfully save into the database. And then the next thing will be the data, which will be the new user. Okay. Then over here on the catch, we're going to do a res status 500, and we're going to pass JSON back. And we're not going to do success false because of the falsy rule in JavaScript. We do not have to do this. If we just exclude it, it will be false by default. And we'll put a message here, which will just be the error itself. Okay, and guys, this is how simple it is. Let me again walk you through this one more time because we're going to do this a couple times with the post and the comments and the upvote. Is we have a basic function right here that is going ahead and it's pulling the username and the password from our request body. Then we're making a new instance of a user. Now this doesn't actually create our user, it just creates a new instance of it. And once we do the save function, it will go ahead and try to save it. And if it does, it will go to this then. If it doesn't, it will go to this catch and throw an error. And we'll see here that we're just responding back with the data or the error. Okay. Now what we can do is go over here to our routes and we'll import. Actually, we can just copy this and paste it and change this to user controller. And we'll put this as basic routes. And then we'll have user routes. And we'll do routes.post because again we're posting, and we'll give the this endpoint sign up user controller dot post. All right, now that this is set up, what we're going to use is a tool, and I should have said this at the beginning. If you guys don't have it already, we're going to be using Postman to test our different endpoints. It's really, really simple. I'll leave actually a link down on the bottom. You can just download it real quick. I use it all the time, and if you're going to be doing any API work, it's something that you'll use quite frequently. But we'll go over here, and remember that we have this prefix /API. I'll go back over to there just so I can show you guys again. Because we didn't do this just /, we did the /API, everything will now be /API/signup or /API/login or whatever that might be, because it's a good way to just kind of distinguish this is an API and separate it from other routes that we might set up later that aren't associated to the API. All right, so we can do API/signup, and it's really handy right here. You can choose post. You'll see a ton of different methods that we could do, but we're going to be doing a post, and then we're going to click on the body, and we're going to want to send raw. And from the raw, we're going to select the type, which will be JSON. So you're going to be sending it JSON. Start with making an empty object. And in here, keep in mind that JSON data, you have to have the keys and the values both in quotations. We're going to have a username, and the username will be devcoffee. I guess camel case is fine. And then the password will be something random. Okay. So now if I send it, we'll see that we got something. And this is an error that I was actually expecting. Let's go ahead and look at it. It says cannot read property username of undefined. Okay, so that's pretty much saying that right over here, this username, and I'm assuming the password as well, is undefined. So we're passing it in here and it doesn't even exist. It's undefined, it's gonna blow up, and we should expect that. That's because we have to use another or a middleware that basically parses that body for us, which is called body parser. It's pretty straightforward, right? But this is something that pretty much, if you get any boilerplate with Express, you'll see this body parser at almost pretty much in every single boilerplate. So let's npm install body parser and save it. And then we'll wait for that to save real quick. And we're just going to go over here. And right where our middleware is, we're going, or first off, we need to import it. So let's go ahead and import body parser from body parser. Okay, and then we're going to do app.use body parser.json. And what this will do, this will parse any JSON that comes in, and this should work. Let's go ahead and start up our server again. We go over here, we click sign up. We'll see that it says password is required. So it looks like that we did pass a password. So let's go see why that's an issue right there. So we have password. Let's go ahead and debug this real quick. We'll console.log our request body and see what's going on. Okay, it also looks like this is something else that we'll have to do. Mongoose's promise library is deprecated, so we have to go over to our models. I'm sorry that I'm just saying this now. Live coding, right? It's a lot of fun. I think I have it copied over here. Right under the schema, you have to set mongoose.promise to the global promise. Just copy and paste that, and we'll get rid of that error right there. You'll see we'll no longer get that error. But let's go ahead and debug what we're doing over here. We'll go ahead and hit send again, and it should give us the exact same error. Okay, and we'll see that it's passing the username and the password. You know what? We probably named something wrong here. Yep, there it is. So we'll see. You guys are probably screaming at your computer right now, like, what are you doing? You put 3 S's right there. And you probably should, because I did put 3 S's right there. Now, if we go back over here, hit send, we'll see that it saves. The success is true. The data right here is sent. It assigns a ID, and I'll get more into that later. You guys should have a general understanding of the ID that it does apply to that field, and then a password, a username, and then a version. Now, again, I want to remind you, in a practical database, you never want to have a raw password just sitting there. You're pretty much begging for a hacker to see this, or someone just to see a password in a query or something, and you're going to have a really bad time. Let's just double check in our database and make sure that it's there. So I'm going to open a new window and get into my Mongo console. There we go. And so I'm in here. I want to use, what do we call it? Dev coffee. So I'm going to use that. And then I'm going to do db.users.find. Now, something with Mongoose to keep in mind that it's not going to be user, it's going to be users. Or this isn't MongoDB in general, that it is going to be the plural way of doing that. And we'll see, let's do .pretty to that to make it look nicer. And we can see it has the exact same thing that it did have in Postman. This is awesome. So guys, I think we're gonna wrap it up right there. Now in the next video, we're gonna be doing the rest of the models. So the comments, the upvotes, the downvotes, and the posts itself. And we're gonna start writing out all the logic for those routes. So creating a comment on a post, pulling individual posts, the upvote downvote system. Should be a lot of fun. We're gonna be relating a lot of data and using Mongoose and all of that fun stuff. And then also the video after that will be covering authentication, validation, so we can really secure our API and get this fully functional. And then we're gonna get to the real fun part, which is kind of part 2, I would say, is actually bringing it to the Vue using Vue.js. We're gonna be using other front-end frameworks as well. But for this tutorial, we're just going to be focusing on Vue.js for the Vue. You guys can use this API for anything, though. If you wanted to do Jquery or just vanilla JavaScript and make your Reddit clone, go for it once we get this API done. So I thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you tune in for the rest of the series. But until next time, guys, I'm Chris Pena, and I still like coffee.
Get away, factory.